Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Hey, we're back with more live from the Heartland for the week of June 24th in the year 2023. And as is a growing tradition on this show, we bring on former and current comrades who I know from way back in my political activities, this time with Students for Democratic Society. It's one of our leaders from back in the day, Clark Kissinger, who now is in Georgia. But I remember him when he was here in Chicago as the National Secretary of SDS, a guy who opened a gun store here in Chicago, who went on to open an organization or help found an organization in Rogers Park called Citizens for Independent Political Action. And that's what drew me to bringing you on, Clark, because I'm involved with a group called Network 49, a progressive outfit in the ward. And every once in a while, I'm older than a lot of people, and I remember that there was a group up in this neck of the woods that you were involved with. So without me running my mouth anymore, I'm saying hello to you, and how are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. It's a lot warmer down here in Georgia than when I lived in the north.
It's cold here today. It's in the sun, but it's cool. We're right by the lake, as you know. So what have you been doing for the last 50 years?
No, more like 60. I remember I graduated from college in 1960. Wow. So I got involved in I guess in SDS in like 62 because I by that time I was doing graduate work up at Wisconsin, and somebody told me about some group called Students for Democratic Society, and I went to see this guy. He pulled a box out from under his bed, and it is full of mimeographed copies of the Port Huron Statement. And so I got one and I read it, and I was actually pretty impressed. Three things that struck me in it. One was the idea that students could actually have agency. In the 50s, when I was in college, politics meant like playing in the sandbox of student government. And another thing that struck me was a call for politics based on morality. And a third thing that attracted me was anti-communism that was in the thing. I mean, none of us were communists then, but we knew what pernicious role that anti-communism and the McCarthy period had played in the period that we had just gone through. The end of the Port Huron Statement was a call to realign the Democratic Party. And everybody hey, Nixon finally did it. But nobody paid much attention to that. And by the end of 64, the Democratic Party was a dead letter because the first urban rebellion had occurred. The Mississippi Freedom Party was kicked out of the Democratic Convention, and Lyndon Johnson had done the Bay of Tonkin hoax. So we were off and running at that point.
Tell us a little bit about that March on Washington back in the day, the first one where I think Paul Potter gave a big speech.
Right.
I wasn't there, but I learned about SDS through the college press service. And I had read about a meeting on hazard of unemployed minors, the Northern Student Movement, SNCC, and SDS. And it kind of captured my imagination. Then at Berkeley, while surrounding a police car with Jack Weinberg in it during the free speech movement,
right,
I found a piece of paper on the ground that was Build the Interracial Movement of the Poor. Right. It talked about the economic research and action projects, including JOIN, where I came to work. That's when I knew about you, and you were in the national office.
Right. Well, you ask about that March on Washington. Up till that point, really nobody had done anything about the war in Vietnam. I mean, it was, I actually went to an anti-Vietnam War demonstration as early as 62, I believe, when Madame New visited the United States. But this was the Democrats' war. And so most progressive people sort of kept their mouths shut about it and went along with it. And SDS had a meeting in December of 1964, and somebody made a proposal that we do a March on Washington against the war. And I.F. Stone was actually at the meeting and spoke. It was kind of a historic thing. And there was a lot of debate about, is that what we should really do or not? And in the end, we did it, and it was very important. And it was the first major manifestation. Was not the first demonstration against the war, but it was the first national level manifestation. 25,000 people marched up the mall against the war, and it was a very significant thing. The other thing that was significant about it is it was done on a non-exclusionary basis. It's probably hard to realize today, but back in those days, if somebody, one of the mainstream organizations, called an anti-war demonstration, any alleged communist organization was not allowed to participate. We did away with rules like that and said, hey, anybody that's opposed to the war is welcome to come.
Well, Clark Kissinger, you went on at the same time Join was going on in Uptown, and I'm thinking 66, 7, and 8. You left the national office and you started a group, or were involved in starting a group. I think Art Vasquez was one of the people. It was called Citizens for Independent Political Action.
That's
and
right.
It just so happens that it was in the 49th Ward where I reside today. So tell us about what led you to do that, what you guys did. And then I think you ran for office, but you'll get that in there.
I did. I'll get it in there. But, the 60s was a huge educational thing for me. I mean, I think I tried every version of reformism possible in the 1960s. I went on demonstrations. I organized demonstrations. I voted for better candidates. I took part in civil disobedience. I later worked in a factory. I was elected a union steward. I ran for public office. I wrote exposés. And by the end of the 60s, it became clear that we lived in a system that could not be reformed. And what we had to do was actually to have a revolution. But this running for office and doing things like Citizens for Political Action, independent political action, was part of that learning process. We were inspired by, what was the name of that guy that ran for Congress out in Berkeley and almost unseated a major liberal progressive out there? And
Bob Scheer?
Who? Yes, Bob Scheer.
He was the editor of Ramparts, yeah.
Yeah, people said, wow, maybe we could actually take on the Democratic Party from the bottom up and oust all those people and take it over somehow. Well, of course, you can't just walk in and take over ruling class parties. But we ran an independent anti-war candidate. I was the candidate for alderman. And of course, in the Chicago machine, the aldermanic races, were held on odd numbered years, not when congressional and presidential elections. So there was an extremely low voter turnout. Nobody but whoever the poll workers got out. But I am proud to say that I got a vote in every single precinct of the 49th Ward. And I was running against Paul Wagoda. I don't know whether you remember that name.
I remember that name, yeah.
And although I lost, Paul Wagoda ended up going to prison on some sort of, financial hanky-panky. But one of my favorite campaign photographs is a picture of me standing in front of the 49th Ward Democratic Party office, pointing to it, and the caption was, "Kissinger investigates blight in the 49th Ward."
Nice. Well, tell me the kind of work you were doing then. I mean, I used to think of Rogers Park in the 49th Ward as kind of more middle class. I'm living in Uptown. Today,
Absolutely.
It's really multi-class, multi-racial, probably larger. I always say there are larger concentrations of more diverse racial, ethnic, and religious group than anywhere else. But my kid claims Queens in New York more so.
Yeah. It was also something of a university community because of Loyola and Mundelein College, which was independent at that time. And probably the heart of the progressive community was actually north of Devon and the northern end of the ward at that time. But we were out on the streets everywhere, campaigning against the war and calling on people to strike a blow against your real enemy. And I guess my campaign slogan was, when a machine shortchanges you, kick it. And a lot of people, got involved in it. And it was interesting. And like I said, it was part of that learning process about how you can't change society.
Well, we've gotten a little bit of you getting involved in the movement, and why don't you give us a short synopsis of some of the things that you think were important that would are still important today, and what people might do around them. I'm particularly interested in older progressives sharing their experiences and encouraging younger people to learn from our mistakes or pick up where we left off.
Well, as I said, I think at the end of the 60s and then going into the 70s, I basically made a break with idealism, and said, hey, look, you really have to get practical. And we live in a world today where we don't live in a world of scarcity anymore. It's in the history of the human race. It's an amazing thing to no longer live in a world where there's no reason for anybody to not have enough food to eat or have medical care or whatever. The only reason that the majority of the people of the world don't have that is an economic and political system of capitalist imperialism. And until that is overthrown, we are not going to be able to make significant social changes. And this, I learned that by, I had some important experience with the Black Panther Party. I went to China very early in 1972, got to see what alternatives might actually look like. And ever since then, I have been working in that direction. We live now also in a particular time where we have two enormous threats that we have to take on. One is the destruction of the climate and the entire planet. And it is a problem that simply cannot be resolved under capitalism. And the other thing is the threat of fascism, which is very, very real in this country. I did, in fact, come out and voted in 2020 for the first time in 50 years. Because it was not an election between Tweedledee and Tweedledum. It was a question of whether we would have fascism implemented very quickly in this country, or whether we would still continue to have a chance to fight against it. So these are the things that continue to motivate me up to this point. And I also studied and learned a lot. I spent a lot. Originally, I went back and I read all the. I read Marx and I read Lenin. I went to China. I read Mao, and today I read the contemporary communist writers like Bob Avakian and people who are really grappling with what would you have to do if you really wanted to do it, if you really wanted to save the planet, if you really wanted to make a society in which people would want to live and could live and live fulfilling lives. What would you actually have to do? What would the practical steps be? And so these are the questions that I engage with today.
Clark, are you doing any writing?
I'm actually a little bit like you, trying to do some videography now. So maybe you can see my camera in the background there.
Nice.
Because really, the world is for better or for worse, moving away from writing. And, the young revolutionaries that I work with today are putting stuff on TikTok every week. I mean, it's no wonder the establishment wants to get rid of TikTok. But I think that's kind of the wave of the future. I think it's video is the way that more and more political communication is and will be taking place.
Well, we're going to have you back on probably more often than you've been on. But one thing that I thought of, I know that you're a little cautious around the voting question, and I had sort of two things. I wanted to, in Georgia, which is a real battleground state, and I think in standing in opposition to fascism, where you did elect two Democratic senators, I'm wondering about the SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, legacy in that state. And then if we got time, maybe your thoughts on, even though, it's part of the imperialist democratic process, what about democratic socialists kind of emerging in some cities? Like we have, I think, 9 people in our new city council who are DSA type people.
Well, I think that's a topic for a whole nother discussion. But I wish I could say that there was a SNCC legacy in Georgia, but frankly, I haven't seen it. I don't see it. I was actually down. I visited Atlanta and went to visited the SNCC office in the early 60s. I think I joined Friends of SNCC in 59 or something like that, and went to a SOC conference. You remember the Southern Student Organizing Committee?
Yeah, I
Um,
remember.
yeah, things like that. So it's in a certain sense, that willingness to put your body on the line and stand up for what is right is something that's not so much with us anymore. And the problem at this point I thought it was important in 2020 to because we bought ourselves some time. Let's put it that way.
We did.
We bought 4 years, but unfortunately, most of that has been squandered by people getting ready for doing another round of electoral cretinism. And the Democratic Party simply cannot be counted on to stop fascism in this country. And as a matter of fact, what would happen if we went through another election like this and Trump called on his people to march on Washington? Hey, that they would come armed. I know what it's like down here, and I know there's preparations going on everywhere for a civil war in this country. And the Democratic Party will fold in front of that like a wilted flower. So we really have to get much more serious in terms of the type of movement that has to be built if we are going to save ourselves and to save the future.
Well, I really appreciate that. And it's an ongoing debate in my own head. And this is an official invitation for you to come back on Live from the Heartland and the not too far off. And it's really been great talking to you, Clark. And, it's even better than that STS email thing that we go back and forth on with a lot of people. This way I get to see you, talk to you. So do you have a website or a way that people can reach you if they want to see things that you're doing?
Sure. It's dissident.info, dissident.info.
Okay, brother. You have a great day and keep doing good in the world. We'll see you, and thanks for coming on Live from the Heartland.
Thank you.